What I'm trying to say is, Rudolph, with your nose so bright, won't you guide my sleigh tonight?
Hello, season's greetings, and welcome to a very special series of holiday episodes from the Cine-Files. My name is Steve Morris. I'm a filmmaker and directing instructor in Los Angeles, California.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Rocha. I'm a writer, producer, host, voiceover artist here in San Diego, California. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, season's greetings, whatever you do to celebrate during this time. Very excited for us to dive into these, mini-series that we're doing in essence this week, breaking down some of these Rankin and Bass specials, Steve.
We've done some of the great holiday films of all time, like It's a Wonderful Life and Miracle on 34th Street. We've done Love Actually. We've done all these great films. We're like, well, what are the other Christmas traditions? Well, some of them were those shows we watched on TV every single year. And of course, the top among those are these Rankin and Bass specials. And because we're jumping into not only Christmas classics, but childhood classics, we've decided to do something that we've never done on the Cine-Files before, which is to censor us and to keep our filthy mouths from saying terrible things that we have sometimes in the past, because these are really family-friendly shows, and we want to be a family-friendly podcast to go along with them.
Absolutely. I mean, the way you keep a business going is to keep appealing to multiple generations and the new generations that come through. And so if some of you want to share our episodes with some of your youngins that you're maybe introducing these Rankin and Bass episodes to for the first time or revisiting, we are basically creating this series to be a cuss-free zone, because we want you all to share this with your family if you feel like it.
And something else you could share is patreon.com/the Cine-Files. In fact, it could be your holiday gift to some movie lover that you know, and you can give them ad-free versions of the show, access to our Cine-Files shorts, some of which are going to be holiday themed in the next few weeks as well. Yeah. You can also go to Apple Podcasts if you're an Apple person and also get those shorts and ad-free versions of the show. It is the best way to support the Cine-Files.
Yeah, another way you can support Cine-Files is if you listen to our commercials in between the breaks, or in between our shows, rather, the breaks that happen, and you hear a product or you hear a client that you want to support and try out their product, then please make sure you use our code so that they keep coming back to support us here on the Cine-Files. We've had some great sponsors this year. Looking forward to see what new and fantastic sponsors we get in 2025. So keep supporting them as you support us as well, as long as they're products that you would actually use.
And we've decided not to do one, not to do two, but to actually explore 3 Rankin and Bass classics, as well as talk a little bit about some of their other films in our Cine-Files shorts. And the 3 we decided is the holiday one that started it all, which is Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Probably my favorite, which is Santa Claus is Coming to Town. And I think your favorite, which is The Year Without a Santa Claus.
Yeah, I can't wait to dive into these. I mean, Steve, these decorated my childhood. I'm sure as they decorated yours, and maybe many people who are listening to us now, these were the things that you look forward to. You watched it multiple times, just like It's a Wonderful Life, and you enjoyed them and they stayed with you. And there's a special nostalgic feel to these. Although the animation is very rough, the stop motion is kind of rough, there's still a magic and an allure, I think, to all of these. And look, it's the holiday season after a bit of a rough year, and these specials, I think, are much more essential now than ever. And the messages within these specials, I think, are very important and touching and moving, and maybe a reminder for a lot of us that there's positivity and hope and acceptance in the world. And you see it all throughout these specials for sure.
My guess is your answer is the same as mine, but do you remember how you first came to Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer?
Well, I mean, I can't even remember the exact time, but I certainly can remember that watching it on TV, I think it was on CBS or NBC, wherever they were showing it. And I just remember these are the things that your parents plopped you down in front of the TV to watch and enjoyed with the whole family. So I do remember watching it as a child and it being one of my favorites. I remember the Island of Misfits toys immediately being a thing that stayed in my mind forever. The Abominable, Yukon Jack, so much of this, plus that sound that Rudolph's nose made. Because I think I knew the song before I ever saw the special, and then the idea of it making a noise never even occurred to me. So there was so much to remember from the first watch that has always stayed with me, even up to now.
Yeah, it's the same answer for me. I have no idea when I first saw it. It always existed. Every year at Christmas time, this would come along with Charlie Brown and all these other ones that were perennial favorites and watch them over and over and over again. And, for those of you who are not familiar with the world of Rankin and Bass, they did a whole bunch of animated films in the 60s, 70s, and even into the 80s. Most of the most famous ones were stop motion animation, but they also did traditional hand-drawn animation, like for Frosty the Snowman being the biggest one of those. And we should say, stop motion has been with us since the beginning of film, from the silent era all the way through The Lost World and King Kong, of course, Ray Harryhausen that we grew up with. But this was a sort of a different approach to it. And I want to talk a little bit about Rankin and Bass before we jump into the movie.
Sure.
These guys were advertising guys in the 50s, and that is how they met. So I'm totally picturing the full Mad Men.
Yeah.
And they decided to go off on their own and find their own form their own company, which was initially called Videocraft International. They have very, very different personalities. Jules Bass, who was the writer and lyricist and also a director, he was mellow, feet up on the table, relaxed. Arthur Rankin, totally the opposite. These are the heat miser and cold miser, like he was strict, he was disciplined, he was organized, and he was the artist. He was the artist half of the group. And one of the things that they did as they formed this new company was they found this stop motion technology and an approach to doing stop motion from Japan that was called Animagic.
Wow.
And so one of the weird things about this is they were an American company who used Canadian voices for the most part. And then they're one of the first companies to ship their animation overseas and have it completed in Japan. That's a really interesting approach. And all the stuff was like, so they would draw all the story. They would write the script, record the voices, write the music, record the songs, and then storyboard it all out, do all their designs in 2D animation. And then they would ship all of that to multiple companies in Japan. There was Tohei, there was Mushi Productions, and Topcraft. And all these companies would work together to create the thing that they made. And a lot of people say, oh, this is claymation. This is not claymation. These aren't made out of clay. These are like little wooden toys. Some places they're jointed, some places they're not. They're really, really simple. And in Japan, they would film the whole thing and ship it back, and there we would put it all together.
Wow. It was amazing. I mean, I don't know if there's ever been a book released, and it's only because I've never researched this, so maybe there is one that people know about, but like the influence that Japan has, the essential nature that Japan has to cinema, not only just the influence, but also as in this situation, assisting in these situations, like these animated specials and features and whatever. You like, I wonder if there's a book out there that explores the amount of co-production or partnerships that were around for film since the dawn of film here in the States with Japan. I wonder how much of that can be explored and seen,
It's a great question.
I had no idea about this, by the way, Steve. Yeah. No idea,
Yeah, it's so crazy. And it's funny, like, it's not exactly the same, but we were just talking about The Sound of Music and that they did versions of the Von Trapp stories in Germany in the late 50s. And this is the late 50s, which is like 12 years after World War II, that these companies in Japan are starting to do animation projects for companies in the United States. I mean, it's really interesting the way this is all happening. And we're moving towards, of course, where Japan is going to emerge as a dominant player in technology and in manufacturing. And I mean, I'm sure there are many, many books about this. They were advertising guys, so they had lots of advertising contacts. And so the first thing they started doing is commercials. And then they also, before Rudolph, they did a Pinocchio. And then finally it was GE, who they had worked with as advertisers, that sponsored Rudolph. And that was this project that they moved into. And Rudolph is based on the 1939 short story by Robert L. Mays, who created the character of Rudolph. And then the 1949 song written by his brother-in-law, Johnny Marks, and this becomes a big hit. And this is something that they do a lot, which is that a whole bunch of these Rankin and Bash shows are based on a song that was already popular. And so the song Rudolph was very, very popular.
It's kind of smart business. Take something that's already well known and then add visuals to it and tell a pretty interesting story with each of these. Yeah.
The writer who wrote most of the Rankin and Bass stuff is Romeo Muller. And he said, I don't know if this is true. He said, I wanted to base Rudolph off of Mays's original book, but I couldn't find a copy, so I just made it up.
I don't know. I imagine it might not have been that easy back then to find a copy of stuff like that.
I mean, couldn't he just go on Amazon or something?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
What's the problem? The director is Larry Roemer, but it sounds like Rankin and Bass were there. You know what I mean? Like, that yes, he was the director, but they made sure that everything was the way they wanted it. And the thing we have to say is when this comes out, there are 3 networks.
Yes.
So basically at least, a third of Americans were watching this show. And I'll tell you something, it was a lot more than that. Millions and millions. More people probably saw Rudolph. More percentage of American TV viewers saw Rudolph than basically anything that is watched today other than the Super Bowl.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's make family entertainment that people want to see.
Yep.
We'll watch.
Shall we get into the film?
Oh, wow. Yeah, let's do it. Let's jump into it.
We start, John, a la Citizen Kane, essentially as a newsreel.
Which isn't the only time we will start these Rankin and Bass with a newsreel.
And what we see in this newsreel footage is newspaper clippings of these horrible winter weather. We see footage of storms. We see all of the real life humans dealing with winter. And I think if you didn't know any better, you're like, oh, we're gonna watch a human thing and not even know that you're about to go into an animated film.
Right.
If I live to be 100, I'll never be able to forget that big snowstorm a couple of years ago. Well, you might not believe it, but the world almost missed Christmas.
This is the voice of Burl Ives playing the talking snowman here. Burl Ives, very famous actor. Of course, we have spoken about him at times on numerous podcasts, talking about his music or his performances here. A guy from Illinois, dropped out of college in 1930, wandered the world. Steve, hitching rides, doing odd jobs, street singing. Got into summer stock. This led him to CBS Radio in 1940. And by the 1960s, he had recorded over 30 albums for Decca, including one of his famous hits, Little Bitty Tear Let Me Down from 1962. Of course, he is the singer-narrator for Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, but he's best remembered for creating the role of Big Daddy in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. He also won Best Supporting Actor for The Big Country, which is one of the newer Westerns that I've seen that I had not seen before from 1958. He was also the voice of Sam the Eagle, the narrator of the classic Disneyland attraction America Sings in Tomorrowland, and he was the visual inspiration for the original illustrations of DC Comics supervillain Hector Hammond. I had no idea.
I did not know that.
One of Hal Jordan Green Lantern's arch enemies here. And the reason he was chosen to do this was because, as you said, Rankin and Bass had a great relationship with General Electric, but they needed a bigger celebrity, which would later happen in other specials. They laid the blueprint essentially by casting Burl Ives, who was very well known in the mid-'60s. And so they cast him to play this snowman so that people would take a chance on the special and watch it, since this was their first one out the gate. So very smart, because I think it was I think Stan Francis was the original voice of the snowman, and then they went with Burl Ives, which makes sense. He's a great narrator for this stuff,
Did you have, as a kid, any relation to Burl Ives? Or did you grow up with him?
Yeah, I mean, because of the Christmas music. Like he had albums and stuff. So I would listen to it as a kid, not knowing who Burl Ives was. And I don't think I knew him until I saw Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, really knew who he was. But I imagine I would watch him on specials and variety shows. I'm sure he popped up on like Carson and the Dean Martin Celebrity Roast or stuff like that, or he must have popped up on these variety shows. So I was aware of him, but I wasn't really aware of him, because there were so many performers who popped up on those variety shows.
It's so funny thinking about how we grew up versus how my kid has grown up. Because my kid grows up with access to all things, every entertainment thing he could possibly want on all moments. Sure. Yeah. I only had what I had. And so I had a few record albums.
Yeah.
The first record albums I ever bought were the 2 Monkees albums that were 25 cents at a garage sale. Right, yeah. And I had a Burl Ives album, and I had the Royal Guardsmen doing Snoopy and the Red Baron, and
right.
And a couple of these other ones that were sort of youth-ish, and I listened to them over and over and over and over again because that's all I had, right. So I listened to Burl Ives. I had a couple albums I listened to a lot, particularly Big Rock Candy Mountain. Oh, and it was just that. So that voice is really, really powerful.
I mean, I can't remember a time where a Holly Jolly Christmas wasn't in my mind.
Yeah.
Christmas, yeah.
Nice around here, isn't it? I call it Christmas Town, better known as the North Pole. Christmas tree forest. Yep, here's where we grow 'em. Nice place to live, you know.
It's so funny how things kind of get like I remember when we did King Arthur and we did Robin Hood kind of stuff, and we is that these stories get created over time. Yeah. Like Santa Claus isn't a story that was invented. It was there was a little piece from here, and then this got added, and then this got added, and I feel like Rankin and Bass, man, this is where we're going to add some details about how Santa works.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things apparently is that seals are very important to Santa Claus.
Well, this is an allusion, right, to Christmas seals, which was
I hadn't thought about that. Sure,
right? Yeah, which was I think a charity that was around back then, so it was just kind of getting its name out there and knowledge. So Christmas seals was a thing that for many years, I remember in the 80s and 70s, and maybe even into the 90s, that Christmas seals was a big charity thing to help people out during Christmas.
And we see Santa's castle, and we see the Clauses, Santa and Mrs. Claus. And what do you think now? I mean, you've obviously watched this many times, but now watching it as an adult and a professional cinephile, what do you think about the look of Rudolph and this world that they're creating?
It's interesting because right off the bat, Rudolph has the red-nosed reindeer from the beginning. We get Santa. I like Santa, and Mom's saying that he isn't eating enough.
Skinny Santa.
He's a skinny Santa, and she's going to have to take the suit in, and he's stressed out. So it's an interesting Santa in the approach, and I like the voice. Stan Francis is the voice of Santa, and I think he does an excellent job with that kind of lower register type of approach to Santa. And oh, come on, mother, those kinds of things. And I'm sure that's an allusion to how they spoke in the Midwest, I think, in the 1950s and 60s, this idea of mother and father calling each other that, even though they're husband and wife. And so you get that folksy spin on it, right? And on the other side, you've got Donner with who is the kind of head coach of the football team or so. He's got that energy. He's not, obviously we do meet the coach, but like he's got that abrasive dad energy, right? That masculine dad energy. And so like he's immediately on Rudolph and so you got to hide your nose, so it's two different things in the interpretation. It's a bit of a rough world that Rudolph is being born into.
We're going to get to some rough stuff. It's funny. Yeah. So I have several thoughts as we move into this Rankin and Bass world. The first one is that I don't know. I watched it off of the new Blu-ray, which has been remastered. Yeah. It looks really good.
I know it's beautiful.
Looks so much better than my memory of it is. They just cleaned it all up. It really looks nice. That being said, I'm trying to think of how to put this in exactly the right way, which is that we have covered the great films, obviously, on the Cine-Files, Citizen Kane and Lawrence of Arabia and The Godfather and Seven Samurai. And we've covered passionate films, and we've discussed in detail the incredible language, the beautiful cinematography, the creative editing, the magical musical choices, all the details.
Yeah.
And that's what makes those movies great. There are some movies that we love not because of all those things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I can't look at this movie and go, this is the most glorious cinematography. This is the most beautiful animation. This is the most incredible designs.
Right.
This is the most fantastic dialogue. I can't say that.
Right.
These are beloved films. Sometimes movies are beloved because of the place that they have in your heart. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I feel about this, is like, and in particular with Rudolph, because this is the first one of these. Mm-hmm. They're kind of figuring it out.
Yeah,
the budgets are relatively low. And so, if you were going to go like, hey, I'm going to show you a great piece of cinema, and you put Rudolph on for someone who'd never seen it, it wouldn't work. Mm-hmm. It works because it's part of our childhood. You know what I mean?
100% agree. A lot of people have that now when they watch stuff from the 90s or the 2000s that you and I don't have the same connection to, right? I mean, people love the Power Rangers stuff. I was too old to be into the Power Rangers by the time they became a big deal. But people have a reverence for those. And you go back and watch those shows. Those are some terrible, terrible shows in terms of the quality and the acting and whatever. But there's a nostalgia element to it that people really love and appreciate from the Power Ranger stuff. And so it's all just about what decade you were born in and what was available for you to enjoy. Yeah.
Well, the interesting thing is that particularly with things like Rudolph, I'm sure there are parents who are saying, hey, I got to show you the Power Rangers that I grew up with as a kid. I'm sure those parents exist. But there are generations of parents that are showing their kids Rudolph and Charlie Brown and the Grinch and things like that because and they're really living on. As you said, we got Skinny Santa and Mrs. Claus trying to fatten him up.
I love this Christmassy time of year, especially when everything is running happy and smooth like it is this season. Nothing like that year of the big snowstorms. I don't know what we would have done without Rudolph to pull us through.
So we're getting little hints about where the plot is going to go. And then, and this is the thing Rankin and Bass does several times. Sam, our snowman, behaves as if he was asked a question.
Rudolph? Could it be that some of you are not acquainted with the story of Rudolph? Well, pull up an ice block and lend an ear.
And then he goes on to the song.
You know Dasher, and Dancer, and Prancer, and Vixen, Comet, and Cupid, Donner, and Blitzen. But do you recall the most famous reindeer of all?
In the exact same way that he'll later do in Santa Claus is Coming to Town, we'll start the song, but we're not going to give you the song until the end.
Yeah.
It was springtime, and Santa's lead reindeer, Donner, had just become a proud papa.
And we cut to the cave, and there is Donner and his wife and baby Rudolph.
Yeah, Donner is voiced by Paul Kligman, who some of you may remember this voice because he played J. Jonah Jameson in the Spider-Man series from the 1960s, the famous animated Spider-Man series. Yes, and there are quite a few Spider-Man people in this, which we'll get to, but he was the voice of J. Jonah Jameson in that series that ran for 3 seasons, you know, the Spider-Man. So if you've watched any of those, he is the voice of J. Jonah Jameson.
And the first thing, of course, we see is that brightly glowing nose, and we hear,
Papa, Mama, he's got a shiny nose.
Shiny? I'd even say it glows.
and again, it's funny. There's these techniques in these shows that nobody uses anywhere else. And this is one of them, which is that we're going to hear little snippets that kind of relate to the lyrics from the song that we're all so familiar with. And it works in this totally weird way.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
And just as they're looking at that, there's Santa at the door who says,
Well, Donner, where's the new member of the family? After all, if he's going to be on my team someday, he'd better get to know me.
And then we hear that whistle, and the nose glows, and Santa says,
Great bouncing iceberg.
Now, I'm sure it'll stop as soon as he grows up, Santa.
Well, let's hope so if he wants to make the sleigh team someday.
It's so crazy. I remember when I watched this the first time as an adult with a child, and I went, man, these people are terrible. They're the worst.
Yeah, no, I know. Watching it this time, that was my initial, because I hadn't seen it in a bit, and watching it this time, that was my initial reaction. Like, wow, these people are terrible. But they have to be, because that's the story. Yeah. Rudolph has to, if everyone was accepting Rudolph, we wouldn't even have a show. Yeah. So you've got to create the situation where people are doubting him. And I think it's so smart to start off with something like this, because it's very universal. A lot of people are born with what they think or they're told is some sort of defect or some sort of negative thing about who they are as a person. And people doubt them, and people don't believe in them, or people question them, and they're made to feel like an outcast or an othering type of situation. And so that's a very smart thing to start the first one with. People have a universal feeling, so they'll immediately connect to Rudolph, and having a father and then essentially probably the godfather coming in and rejecting the kid makes you immediately be on the kid's side and makes you question Santa and Donner. And using these deeper voices, I'm sure this related to a lot of kids in the 50s who probably had those dads who were not very emotional or not very caring, and at times could be a bit harsh. Like, it's a hard world, son. You gotta buck up, these kinds of things. So it's I think it's a smart way to approach this, to make us immediately get on Rudolph's side.
Well, and in particular, because we know the song. Because, the people grew up with the song, and people are going to call him, he won't play the reindeer games, and they're going to call him names. We know that's coming. So that's thematically, it totally makes sense. It's so funny. So Santa sings a song, not one of my favorite songs in the Rankin and Bass trilogy. And then he heads out. And Donner is just distraught.
Yeah.
No, Santa's right. He'll never make the sleigh team.
And I'm like, man, the kid was just born.
I know.
Like, wow.
Rough world, brother.
And they decide to cover up what they see as his imperfection.
Yeah.
You'll be a normal little buck just like everybody else, right? A chip off the old antlers.
Yeah, right. There's an element of this. Hide this thing that you are, right?
Yep.
I'm sure for people who are, part of the LGBTQ plus community, I'm sure this is a standard existence for a lot of people in that community when they're born, when they discover that they are gay. It's like, hide that. Be as straight as possible as you can. Try to hide that. Or, if you've got an accent, try to hide that accent somehow. Don't talk so much so they pay attention to it. Or, these things. Or wear clothes that kind of hide how big you are, or try to so there's all kinds of stuff that I think is related to this moment that people can immediately connect to. And it's an abrasive dad. And look, this is the mid 1960s. I think there was a lot of fathers like this when children were born,
Well, here's the epiphany I had a few decades ago, is that I suddenly went, man, there's so many stories where the main character is an outcast. Or does, it's like whether it's Peter Parker or Harry Potter, or, there are all these characters where they don't fit in some way or another. And I'm like, why are these stories so popular? Because like I was a kid who didn't fit in, but I looked at the popular kids. They're all having a good day. They're all cool. They know what to do. And what I realized with the epiphany was, I was like, oh, everybody feels that way.
Yes.
You could be the captain of the football team or the prom queen or whatever it is, whatever role everybody thinks that they want to be, and still feel like an outcast and not loved and all that stuff. And we have known all sorts of very popular people that can still feel that way, It's
a video game. Life is a video game. No matter what level you're at, there is a thing there are obstacles and challenges that you have to overcome. It all depends on where you're born in the spectrum of it, but everyone has those common experiences. It's what they do with those feelings that sometimes separates people from each other. But we all, I think, feel that inadequacy at some points in our lives,
Well, and that's why I think, even though is Rudolph kind of rough and it's sort of their first thing? Yeah. Thematically, I think this is, particularly because this is little kids to watch this. This isn't just like an 8-year-old. This is a 3-year-old can watch this and relate to it. Because right now, the parents have covered up this kid's nose. They're like, this is wrong. We had to hide this thing. And you can see that Rudolph wants his parents' love.
Yeah.
And he snuggles with them. And then the mud comes off and the whistle happens. And it's like, oh, he's already failed.
I think the whistle is kind of genius because not only does it glow, but it makes that noise. So even if you could cover it up, when it lights up, it makes that noise. So it draws the attention. So I think it was kind of smart to add the whistle to make it seem even more obvious and something you can't ignore.
Well, for the first year, the Donners did a pretty fair job of hiding Rudolph's nonconformity.
Nonconformity. I love it.
Right? We're still here, this is still, and it's everywhere. In every possible way, there is a way for you to feel like you don't conform, you don't fit in.
Yeah.
Every way.
Donner taught Rudolph all the ins and outs of being a reindeer, how to get food, how to fight off enemies, things like that. But most important,
and we hear this scary roar and they go and hide.
Most important of all, he taught his son to beware of the abominable snow monster of the north. He's mean, he's nasty, and he hates everything to do with Christmas.
We see those big hairy legs go by. We hear that we're heading up to Christmas, and we see a whole bunch of elves working on toys.
Seems elves have that certain knack for toy making. All except for this one misfit.
And there we see Hermey.
A Canadian actor from Toronto, Paul Soles, is the voice of Hermey, and he was the voice of Spider-Man, Peter Parker, in the classic 1960s animated Spider-Man series. So you've got J. Jonah Jameson and Peter Parker in the same series here. He also appeared in films like The Incredible Hulk, the Edward Norton one, and he was in the score, the Robert De Niro, Marlon Brando film directed by Frank Oz. So he did some on-camera work, but it was mostly voiceover stuff that he was known for. But this was mostly a Canadian-voiced production. The animation being done, obviously, in Japan, as Steve said, but like the voiceover work, most of it are Canadian actors.
And there's a big pileup because Hermey is not keeping up with the toy production line.
What's eating you, boy?
Not happy in my work, I guess.
What?
I just don't like to make toys.
No, well, if that's all.
And then just a huge take.
What? You don't like to make toys?
No.
And it goes down the line of elves. Hermey doesn't like making toys. Hermey doesn't like making toys.
Yeah, very reminiscent of Elf.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely.
Do you mind telling me what you do want to do?
Well, sir, someday I'd like to be a dentist.
A dentist?
What I love about the choice of dentist is that his way of not conforming is by conforming.
Yeah, right.
Is that normally we hear stories where the parents are like, you need to be a doctor, you need to be a businessman, you need to be a lawyer. And the kid goes, I want to be an artist.
Right.
That's the normal story. And this is the opposite. It's like, instead of being someone to make toys, he wants to be what most people would consider, a very traditional job. That is how he is not conforming. And then everyone else gets a break, but not Hermey because he's behind. And they all leave him alone, and he cries a tear in that perfect animagic sort of tear way and sings a little of,
Why am I such a misfit? I am not just a nitwit. You can't fire me, I quit. Seems I don't fit in.
And we see Donner, who is still trying to keep the nose a secret.
All right, son, try it on.
I don't wanna. Daddy, I don't like it.
You'll like it and wear it.
Oh, but Daddy.
And they stick a rubber thing over his nose, which causes him to have a very nasal voice.
It's not very comfortable.
There are more important things than comfort. Self-respect. Santa can't object to you now.
It's so horrible.
It is, right?
And now Rudolph, who's alone, takes off his nose, and now he sings the same song.
Why am I such a misfit? I am not just a nitwit. Just because my nose grows. Why don't I fit in?
And here's what I find so interesting about this. And this is where I go like, is the filmmaking sophisticated? No. But this idea really is. And this is what I really like about it, is we have two stories about conformity. Story one is someone who desperately wants to conform.
Right.
But society won't let him conform because he's different.
Yeah.
They won't let him participate. Story two is about someone who doesn't want to do what society wants them to do, and they want to force him to do that because of what he is. So it's really sophisticated in a thematic sense, dealing with this one thing,
Agreed.
And so time passes. Christmas comes and goes on schedule, and soon it is April. That's when all the new fawns come out with their folks to meet the other new fawns.
And Donner sends out Rudolph again with his nose covered up. Yeah. And he meets another little deer named Fireball. And they're going to be buddies.
It's got that camp feel to it, right?
It's totally camp.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, what's weird too is did you go to camp?
Of course. Yeah. 2 or 3 times. Not that many.
I mean, there are all these, I think my guess is the camps that you and I went to weren't that different from camp someone went to in the 50s. You know
Probably.
what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't think that's really true today.
Oh, no. Right. Yeah. They're much more pampered and spoiled today. Yeah.
And we also hear this word that from Fireball, where are we going? We're going to the reindeer games. Well, I know about again, it's these little drops from things from the song that we all know. Yeah. And he also says,
besides, it's a great way to show off in front of the nose. Come on.
Already into girls at such a young age.
Apparently.
Wow.
Hey, look, things move pretty quick in the reindeer world.
I guess so. I don't know what their life expectancy is, but it must be fast.
And the elves come to sing a song for Santa.
Oh.
You had a reaction to this song. I probably feel the same way as you do.
Yeah, like Santa, I do not like this elf song at all. But I mean, again, here's a Santa who is rejecting the elves. He's annoyed by the elf song.
Yeah.
He's frustrated by Rudolph's nose. So this is a guy who's stressed out about meeting deadlines. And he's like, all right, sing the song, get it over with so I can get back to work. So this is a guy who's very stressed out about everything that's going on in this world. And rightfully so, as Christmas can be quite stressful if you're putting it together. So, it's kind of a an understanding state of mind, but still, it's no less hard to see him being kind of rude to the people we know from the Christmas stories.
You know how today in the geek world, people are speculating about what James Gunn will do with the DC universe and whether or not this character introduced in this film will exist in the new DC universe, and does this Joker work with this Batman, and does this, and how is all that going to work? Clearly, Rankin and Bass did not care, because this Santa is clearly not the Santa we're going to meet, who's awesome. The Santa we're going to meet in Santa Claus is Coming to Town, that guy's great.
Yeah.
This guy, not so much.
This is the Luke Skywalker from The Last Jedi, not the Luke Skywalker from Return of the Jedi.
Yeah. The fact that he's not enjoying the elves, he's skinny, he's a little bit short-tempered, he totally rejects this little deer just because his nose is red.
Yeah.
Like, this is a different kind of guy.
Shames the deer.
Yeah. And now the head elf just lays into the elves.
That sounded terrible. The tenor section was weak.
Wasn't our fault, boss. Hermey didn't show up.
What?
I think I should get a job just making going, what?
Yeah. This guy is a terrible supervisor, by the way. It was horrible. Can't motivate Hermey, and then doesn't even know that Hermey's not even there.
And he finds Hermey, who's doing dentistry on a doll.
Now listen, we have dolls that cry, talk, walk, blink, and run a temperature. We don't need any chewing dolls.
I just thought I found a way to fit in.
You'll never fit in.
He's trying to find a way to take the thing that he loves, which is dentistry, and apply it to the things that he's supposed to do, which is making toys.
He's trying to fit in his own way.
Yep.
But it's not working.
Now you come to elf practice and learn how to wiggle your ears and chuckle warmly and go hee-hee and ho-ho and important stuff like that.
Man, I remember having a conversation with my grandfather. My grandfather, Mark, my dad's dad, was a very kind of traditional business, he was a small business owner. They had a vending machine business, and he worked very, very hard. And that's what he was very focused on, the stuff you were supposed to do in America to be a good citizen. He's not a creative person in any way. And I remember talking to him on the phone. Of course, I'm in theater school and doing plays and things that he has no understanding of whatsoever. And he says, look, I'll tell you, here's the best advice I ever got. You look at your boss, and whatever suit he's wearing, you get a suit that looks exactly like his. And you talk exactly like your boss talks, and that is how you're going to get ahead. And I was like, okay, Grandpa Mark. And that was it, man. That was the words of wisdom, was conformity.
Yeah. And imitation.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. And the boss heads out, leaving Hermey alone, and he goes,
It's like he said, I'll never fit in.
And we hear that Misfit song as he climbs out the window.
I guess I'm on my own now.
I have to say, he's a very industrious kid, Hermey.
Yeah.
I mean, he knows what he wants, and he knows what he doesn't want. And when things are presented to him, he doesn't break down and just kind of give up. He goes, okay, I guess I'm on my own. Here we go. Yep. I'm out of here. Yeah.
We are back to the deer games.
Hey, look! Those!
Because as you said, they're into girls right away. And there we see Clarice, who's the little fawn, who's got a cute little bow so we can tell her apart. And she gives Rudolph a little flirty blinky wink.
Yeah.
And then here comes Coach Comet. And it's just like, it's like you said, this is like classic old school American masculine coach.
My name is Comet. And even though I'm your instructor, I want to be your pal, right?
This is also voiced by Paul Kligman, who does Donner. Yeah.
And the first thing we're going to do is, because we all have to fly because we're going to be Santa's reindeer. Yeah. And so the kids are one at a time going to have to take off.
He won't get to us for a while yet. Now's your chance to get acquainted with that doe.
And Rudolph goes over to her.
I bet you'll be the best.
Clarice is really nice.
Yeah.
It's a nice girl.
It's voiced by Janice Orenstein. This was the last thing she did.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm sure she went on to do other things with her life, but this is the last IMDb credit that she has for her work.
It must be, weird to be one of those kids who's in a Charlie Brown thing or, that doesn't have a career, but we're part of something really, really important to millions and millions of people.
Yeah.
Something wrong with your nose? I mean, you talk kind of funny.
What's so funny about the way I talk?
Well, don't get angry. I don't mind.
You don't?
She's really nice. She navigates that really well.
She navigates everything really well with Rudolph. Shows him acceptance and love and caring, which is great, you know.
And he's just starting to try to ask her out, essentially.
Yeah.
And that's when he gets called back for his turn. And I should say, by the way, we've seen that none of the other deers are able to take off at all.
No.
That's not working for anybody. And just as he's turning to go away, Clarice says,
Rudolph, I think you're cute.
I'm cute! I'm cute!
and he flies a little bit, which everyone is impressed with.
Yeah.
And then he really takes off just in time for Santa to see it.
She said I'm cute!
Not bad. Not bad at all.
That's how it can be the first time a girl tells you that she finds you cute or she likes you. You can be quite excited by it.
Oh yeah, it has a lot of power. By the way, you might notice that the motion in this stop motion seems a little bit jerky. Like there's a little, and the reason is generally film is shot at 24 frames per second, and the basically back in the silent era when they're trying to figure out film, they realize that to create the illusion, because you're really looking at separate frames,
right?
You got to get above 8 frames per second to even create any illusion of motion that you're not just looking at separate frames.
Gotcha.
This is shot at 12 frames per second.
Oof.
And the reason it's shot at 12 frames per second is, this is stop motion animation, which means you take a picture and then you move something, a tiny, tiny bit, and then you take another picture and then you move it and you take another picture. It's very, very time consuming. So to do 24 frames a second is twice as much work as doing 12 frames a second.
Wow.
And you can get away with 12 frames. It does look like people are moving, but it also has that slightly jerky quality because there are many, many fewer frames, half as many frames.
Right.
So Rudolph is thrilled. Everyone is excited. Santa thinks this is the greatest, young reindeer he's ever seen. And he kind of butt heads with Fireball. And then we hear that whistle and the red nose pops out.
For crying out loud!
Fireball, what's the matter?
Get away! Get away from me!
Fireball is freaked.
I mean, those eyes were really scary at Fireball.
Yeah. Totally freaked out. And then Comet comes walking up, and then Comet screams.
Now, what's this nonsense here, Bucks? After all,
And then they all call him names.
Yeah. As they do in the song.
And Santa, man, because Santa is supposed to be the most understanding, loving, just like pure love and joy. That's Santa, right? This Santa says,
Donner, you should be ashamed of yourself. What a pity. He had a nice takeoff, too.
Jesus.
I'll tell you, here's what I wrote down. I know maybe I'm being too philosophical for Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, but I wrote down, this violates a fundamental American principle that success should be built on ability, and anyone with talent that works hard can succeed. That is the American myth. I'm not saying it's always true, but I'm saying that's
American myth. Is it? It's not from other countries who feel this way. They work hard and
of course it is. Of course, but I would say it is specifically American because we didn't have there are no royals. There's no nobility.
Yeah.
There's things are supposed to be. That's the American story is rags to riches. If you work hard and you have talent, you can go and do anything.
Right.
And we have just seen that totally violated because none of the other deer could fly at all. Rudolph totally flied. He's by far the best one. And that because of something that means nothing, just a physical thing, he's completely rejected.
But we also know the age-old trope, which is it's also about how you look.
Oh, yeah.
And looks are important. And the red nose, well, I mean, I'm not saying they should be. I'm saying they are for a lot of people. The red nose is obviously one of those things that takes away from it. So
well, and this is everyone experiences this,
Right.
I mean, even the super attractive, beautiful people got to a certain place where they weren't. There was someone else, like everybody experiences this feeling of I am not good enough,
It's like Salieri in Amadeus, right?
Yeah.
He is what did he say? He's one of 8 people in the world who would know the difference between him and Mozart, but he is one of them who knows it, which is what drives him insane.
From now on, gang, we won't let Rudolph join in any reindeer games, right?
Like, no, you can't even participate in this. You go away. So he heads off, obviously really, really sad, but Clarice comes with him.
Yeah.
Well, what do you want?
You promised to walk me home.
Aren't you going to laugh at my nose, too?
I think it's a handsome nose. Much better than that silly false one you were wearing.
She's the best, right?
Yeah, she says, basically she's saying, be yourself.
Yep.
I like who the guy person is underneath the nose. You don't need that the fake nose. Like, just be yourself. I accept you.
It's terrible. It's different from everybody else's.
But that's what makes it so grand. Why, any doe would consider herself lucky to be with you.
These are one of the hardest things you have to accept in life. Because certainly I felt very othered a lot in my life, being heavy, being Latino, not being into wearing the right clothes for a majority of my life when I was a young kid growing up. There's a lot that I was made to feel inadequate about. And because I didn't have a very strong emotional core or strong sense of self, I allowed that to really affect me for a very long time. So the things that he's experiencing here, I wish more people responded with love and acceptance, because that's basically what she's saying. Like, the things that you think make you terrible are actually or not valuable to the community are actually the things that make you valuable to the community. And if more people embraced, quote unquote, their flaws or their uniqueness, and less people felt insecure about those things or allowed themselves to feel insecure about those things, I think we'd have a happier world, But people need to make fun of to make themselves feel better. And that's also the sad other side of the situation like this,
Well, that's what's really so cool about Rudolph, and that this was something that we were all brought up with, and little kids are still seeing it because this is real stuff that we go through.
Yes.
And so she sings There's Always Tomorrow, and it's loving, and all the animals join in, and it's happy, and we go like, wow, this is going to be really great. He's got someone who cares about him. It's going to be awesome. And then we hear,
Clarice?
Papa!
You get back to your cave this instant.
But
This instant, young lady.
Yes, sir.
Now, there's one thing I want to make very plain. No doe of mine is going to be seen with a red-nosed reindeer.
I was like, and now it just got racist. What it remind me of is one of your favorite movies, which is La Bamba. That's what I was thinking of.
Right. With the white, with Daphne and her relationship with the Donna and her relationship with Richie, and the fact that her parents don't want her to be with him because he's Latino, because he's I think so too. And it's great because it ups the conflict to have even the girl that just for a second you felt like, okay, this story might end in a positive way. Here comes the dad to pull her away from him. So now he's really on his own. His family's rejected him. Santa's rejected him. His community's rejected him. And now even the girl he wants to be with has indirectly rejected him because her father won't let him be with her. So he's fully on his own now.
Well, and you know what you need to find when you're a misfit who's totally on your own?
What's that?
Another misfit.
Yes.
That's why we need misfits. I mean, that's like, and if I look at the vast majority of my friends, we're all misfits. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like all of us found each other, artists and weirdos, and because we didn't quite fit in, but we kind of can fit in with each other,
Exactly. Which is why it's heartbreaking to see how the nerd community has become almost as toxic as the jock community they supposedly were countering, and it's a shame.
When they got toxic? When they got power.
Like everything.
Yeah, that's what I think.
When any group gets power, toxicity is not far behind. Yeah. You're absolutely right.
Because when it's just like, oh, everyone else rejected us, we're going to huddle together. That's one thing.
Yeah.
But when you suddenly everyone's looking to you to be the computer people and the video game people and the Marvel people and all that stuff. Yeah. Well, then you now can reject people out of your club,
right.
That don't fit. It's like, and it's sad.
I agree.
But the person we're not going to reject is the person that Rudolph's about to meet right now, which is Hermey.
Yeah.
Who introduces himself as a dentist, which I don't think Rudolph knows what a dentist is.
He has no idea what it is all the way to the end.
But I don't need anybody. I'm independent.
Yeah? Me too. I'm whatever you said.
By the way, I haven't even said this, but Rudolph is voiced by Billie Mae Richards. She's also it's a woman. So just like Bart Simpson, and she's a Canadian actress. Rudolph was her first voiceover role.
Wow.
She also reprised it for Rudolph's Shiny New Year. She was also the voice in the Care Bears series of Bright Heart Raccoon, and she was a voice in the Clifford series, the Big Red Dog series that they did as well. And she only got residuals for 3 years from this show and didn't get residuals after that. Burl Ives got residuals off this show for the rest of his life. So interesting how these contracts worked out in certain ways. So, but she said, it's funny that my grandchildren, when they watch, my grandchildren's friends, when they watch this, are always amazed that their friend's grandma was the voice of Rudolph.
Yeah, it's because Burl is American,
Right,
and the
right.
union had just changed where people got residuals in the U.S.,
Yes.
but none of the Canadians got that deal.
Right.
What do you say we both be independent together, huh?
You wouldn't mind my red nose?
Not if you don't mind me being a dentist.
And they sing "We're Just a Couple of Misfits," which I think is a really cute song.
Yeah.
And now we see them walking, and they're heading through a big storm.
The abominable. He must see your nose. Quick, douse the light.
And this is another story point, which is that now it's not just that Rudolph's nose gets him kicked out of things.
Yeah.
It's actually dangerous.
Yes. Right. Exactly.
And then we see Yukon Cornelius on the sleigh, who I love. That's a great character.
Yeah, Yukon's great. It's voiced by Larry D. Mann, who, Steve, you and I recently encountered Larry D. Mann as the train conductor in The Sting. That's who. Yes, that is him. He was
funny.
also in The Heat of the Night, the Chuck Norris film The Octagon, and was in numerous TV shows in the 70s, including Quincy, Columbo, Beretta, Gunsmoke, Love American Style, and so on. But that is Larry D. Mann, the Yukon Cornelius.
Who are you?
Who am I? The name's Yukon Cornelius, the greatest prospector in the North.
And he does this thing, which he does many times, just to go, wahoo! And he throws his pick up in the air, drops down, goes into the gold. He picks it out, smells it, licks it, and says,
Nothing.
It's a fun little bit. And then we go back to Burl Ives, and I think two different things about this, which is Burl Ives, takes the cue of talking about silver and gold to go into this song, Silver and Gold.
Silver and gold, silver and gold. Everyone wishes for silver and gold. How do you measure its worth? Just by the pleasure it gives here on earth.
And here are the two things I think about it. The first thing I think is this has nothing to do with the story of Rudolph. It's totally, it's like when we just did Sound of Music and we're talking about the lonely goat herd doesn't advance the story at all, but it's a very fun song. That's how I feel about this. It's Burl Ives singing. He's got a great voice. He sings this really well. The song is actually lovely. I think this actually became a hit for him too, but it also has nothing to do with the story.
Yeah, it's an interesting little thing. And it's been covered a few times. Neil Young did a version of it. Dolly Parton did a version of it. Vanessa Williams did a version of it. So it's an interesting little song that a lot of people seem to like. So
yeah. And now we're back with Yukon and Rudolph and Hermey. And he says, that he's off to get supplies and he's going to give him a lift. And they jump on the sled and he yells, mush. And the little cute dogs, they don't mush. You're mush. Like this. And finally, Yukon grabs the sled himself and he starts pulling it. And the little dogs jump on the sleigh with Rudolph and Hermey. And it's a very cute little bit.
Yeah.
And while this is happening, the abominable snow monster is pulling his head over the peaks and watching him. I love the design of the Bumble. I think he's great.
Yeah. And also I love the music, right? The big stings here. Da, da, da. Those type of things that work so well while you hear the snow whirling around.
Gad, Zeus, the Bumble Snow Monster of the North strikes again.
By the way, you could just watch Yukon Cornelius's mustache. It reacts, it twists, it extends, it flattens. It's really funny.
It does.
Yeah. Also, one thing, clearly the scale of when we first saw the Bumble's legs walk by and the actual size of the Bumble when we see him, they don't exactly match up.
Well, I mean, to be fair, we were watching it from a young reindeer's point of view and a small elf's point of view. So Yukon maybe is a little bit bigger, but I take your point.
They chase them to the edge of the ice. They're right at the water, and Yukon says,
We're trapped. There's no way out. It's my nose again. It's ruined us.
That's like a crazy level. It's not just the rejection of everybody he loves because of his nose, but it actually is going to get him killed.
And that's what he thinks. Like, it's so negative that even I have now, because every place in my world has told me this is terrible, I now have been convinced that it's terrible. So now even I hate this thing about myself. right? And so it's the way it works in people's minds. So it's a deceptively interesting film a special dealing with the idea of mental health when you've been othered, how it affects you.
You know what it just made me think of? Is Malcolm X getting that conch and straightening out that hair.
Right.
You know?
Because he's ashamed of his hair, right? Exactly.
Yep.
The Bumble has one weakness, and I know it.
And he breaks the ice, and they're on that little ice sheet that starts sailing away, and the Bumble goes to the edge and then steps. I love the way they do the water effect.
Yeah.
You know, because it doesn't look like water. It looks like the water in Rudolph, you know, and it's kind of neat.
Observe the Bumble's one weakness. The Bumble sinks.
And we head off into the darkness. We cut back to Donner, who starting to feel bad. Thanks, Donner.
Oh, yeah. Your son runs away. Maybe you did something wrong there, Chief.
And so he goes to look for Rudolph. And then his wife and Clarice said they wanted to help. And he said no.
Yeah.
He said, this is Mann's work. And as soon as he was gone, they go off too. So now they're all heading off to look for Rudolph.
Well, clearly Donner's wife is saying, you can stick that man stuff someplace else because we are going to go after my son.
And the ice sheet, it ends up in a fog.
Fog as thick as peanut butter.
You mean pea soup?
You eat what you like, I'll eat what I like.
I did like that line.
That's a good line. And we hear land ho, and we see this castle up on top of an ice mountain. We see a flying lion eagle type character. Yeah. And Hermey stumbles into what we assume is a jack-in-the-box.
Halt! Who goes there?
This is played by Alfie Scoop, who played Clarabelle the Clown in the Howdy Doody show, Steve.
Oh, wow.
And he played Avram in the Fiddler on the Roof movie, which at some point we are going to do on this damn show, Steve, for God's sakes.
I think I bought it years ago because we said we were going to do it. Yeah. It's sitting on my shelf.
As an honorary Jewish person, I have to push my actual Jewish friend. We have to do this show. We have to do this movie.
You might be one of the most heavy of people I know, really. I think
if I were a rich man.
Yeah.
He was also during World War II, he served as part of the Royal Canadian Air Force in Newfoundland, and he provided the voice of Socrates the Strawman in the 1960s animated series Tales of the Wizard of Oz, as well as the TV film Return to Oz. So, Alfie doing a lot there.
I'm the official sentry of the island of misfit toys.
A jack-in-the-box for a sentry?
Yes, my name is...
Don't tell me. Jack.
No, Charlie. That's why I'm a misfit toy.
I think the Island of Misfit Toys is one of the great ideas. It's just a fantastic idea.
I think this special would never have worked as well as it did without the Island of Misfit Toys. It's so important to show all the different ways and all the different types of toys, and the idea of being a misfit. It's so smart.
Yep. And they go into this song singing about the importance of Christmas and about the joy of the day when a kid gets to open up their toys. And they're contrasting all of this joy and all of this love with Santa Claus delivering his toys to all these happy kids with these toys that nobody wants.
How would you like to be a spotted elephant?
Or a choo-choo with square wheels on your caboose?
Or a water pistol that shoots jelly?
We're all misfits!
I can't help but think that when they made Toy Story, that they didn't go back and watch this episode multiple times, because there is a lot of commentary about toys and the importance of toys and the effect of toys, and when people receive toys and toys being wanted or toys being rejected, right? I think of the Jessie song, her toy that she sings in, I think it's Sean Colvin who sings the song in the second Toy Story 2, when it's Jessie who's left in the box by the highway and the devastation of that. And so I think the song that's being sung here might have influenced that song, because it's very similar in terms of the theme or the approach to it.
Want to know how much we're on the same page?
How much?
I have a note that says, it's like the precursor to Toy Story.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah.
I mean, like
totally.
it's thematically, it's all of that. It is exactly, they were thinking along the same lines, and I'm certain. Well, and the other thing about it is part of why people think this works visually is that these characters in Rudolph, they look like toys.
Yeah. Yes. Right.
You know, they really, really look like toys.
apparently, since this special has come out over the decades, people have gone back and forth and asked the question about Dolly for Sue. Like, why is that doll there? Because it's not obviously a misfit toy, since it's the way it's designed and created, it looks like a regular toy. But apparently in December 8th of 2007, during a trivia game on Wait, Don't Tell Me, I think that's something you know, Rankin admitted that, quote, she was cast off by her mistress and was clinically depressed. Wow. That sounds like Jessie to me from Toy Story 2. So even more of a connection to these Toy Story films. Yeah.
We're all misfits, too. Maybe we could stay here for a while.
Well, you'd have to get permission from King Moonracer.
Who's he?
He rules here. Every night he searches the entire Earth. When he finds a misfit toy, one that no little girl or boy loves, he brings it here to live in this island till someone wants it.
Yeah, Moonracer also voiced by Stan Francis, who did the voice of Santa Claus in this particular episode. So it's the same voice.
That's fascinating because I wrote down, Santa is someone who goes out and flies and delivers toys.
Yeah.
And Moonracer is this person who flies and takes the toys back that nobody wants.
Yeah.
He's like the anti-Santa. So it's interesting to me that they're the same voice person.
Yeah.
So they go to see Moonracer and they explain their situation. And he goes,
"No, that would not be possible. This island is for toys alone."
How do you like that? Even among misfits, you're misfits.
Have you ever had that experience? Like not even fitting in with the misfits?
Yeah. Yes.
Me too.
Had that. It sucks. Yeah.
When someday you return to Christmas Town, would you tell Santa about our homeless toys? I'm sure he could find little boys and girls who would be happy with them. A toy is never truly happy until it is loved by a child.
I mean, that is legitimately the log line for Toy Story.
And they agree to do that, and they all snuggle down into a single bed with the red light of Rudolph's nose glowing all around them. And they're talking about, that tomorrow we'll leave. And Rudolph's going, no, if we leave, the abominable's going to see my nose, and it all starts over again.
Nonsense. It's all for all and one for... one for... let's get some shut-eye.
But it's all settled.
And they all go to sleep, and Rudolph sneaks out.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't want to endanger them.
This is very Harry Potter-ish, right? Harry's always trying to tell Ron and Hermione that they don't need to come with him, that he can handle it. He doesn't want them to get in trouble. I want to handle it myself, and doesn't listen. But they tell him that they want to help him, and then he goes off on his own. And we've seen, of course, numerous franchises that have this as a beat in their overall story.
Goodbye, Cornelius. I hope you find lots of tinsel. Goodbye, Hermey. Whatever a dentist is, I hope someday that you're the greatest.
And he sails away on that ice sheet as we hear roars in the distance. And then we see him at the water, and we hear...
But during all that time, a strange and wonderful thing was happening.
And he lifts his heads, and we see that he has antlers.
Yeah.
Because Rudolph is growing up.
He's growing up.
Rudolph was growing up. And growing up made Rudolph realize you can't run away from your troubles. Pretty soon he knew where he had to go. Home.
Another good lesson.
Yes.
Yeah. So he heads back to Christmas Town, comes up, and of course kids see him and they immediately make fun of him again. They don't go like, hey, where have you been for the last couple of years?
Right.
They just make fun of him. Goes to the cave. It's empty. And there's Santa, who says,
"They've been gone for months, out looking for you."
Clarice?
She's gone too, and I'm very worried. Christmas Eve is only 2 days off, and without your father, I'll never be able to get my sleigh off the ground.
I'm like, geez, Santa.
All about me. It's all about me, Santa.
How about if you go look for him?
You got to slay the flies, don't you?
I'll find him, sir. I'll find them all.
And he's about to leave when suddenly the wind hits. And we have reached what we set up at the very beginning, which is the worst storm in the history of Christmas.
Yeah.
The other thing that happens is Rudolph knows exactly where he has to go. The cave of the abominable snow monster.
Yeah.
And he goes straight to the cave, and he just tries to attack the Bumble. And he gets knocked out by the Bumble, who laughs. I love the Burl Ives hiding behind his umbrella going, tell me when it's over.
It's pretty brutal, man. The abominable dropped a piece of the cave on top of Rudolph, you know?
Yeah. And it ends up this whole time Hermey and Cornelius have been looking for Rudolph because he's their friend. And then there's this line where Burl Ives, where the snowman says,
They arrived in Christmas Town just as the storm hit. And it was a good thing that I sent them right out after Rudolph.
And I wrote down like, oh, now you're the hero. It's like, way to take credit there, snowman. What else have you done? We end up at the cave, and Yukon has come up with a plan. He whispers it to Hermey, who says that could work.
Never knew the bumble snow monster yet who turned down a pork dinner for deer meat.
Cornelius says, do your stuff. And he says, oink, oink. And he's right. The bumble hears the oinks. He comes out. Cornelius drops a big bold, like a snow thing on his head, then drops a boulder on his head and says,
all right, dentist, you take it from here.
And we see that Hermey has some big pliers.
Where he get those pliers, I'll never know.
He's a dentist. It's like, he's well supplied. He ordered it from Amazon.
Yeah, those size?
Yeah. You never know. You never know what kind of molars you're going to have to deal with, John.
Yes.
And then we see the bumble at the entrance, who looks much less threatening without his teeth.
Yeah.
He's nothing without his choppers. Let me at him.
And he drives the bumble back towards the cliff's edge, and he's going to push him off, but it ends up both of them go over the cliff. Yeah. And it's like, oh my God, the bumble and Yukon, are they dead? What's happened? Everyone's really sad looking down at them. And they finally decide they have to go back to Christmas Town.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
We got to get going.
we got to move on, John.
Real quick, by the way, the voice of Abominable is actually a person, Bernard Cohen. He did 49 episodes of the Spider-Man series himself as various voices, but in the 1960s, he was the narrator for these series. The Iron Man animated series, the Submariner animated series, the Thor animated series, the Hulk animated series, the Captain America animated series, and the Marvel Superheroes animated series. So this man who made a name being the voiceover narrator for all of these Marvel shows that were in the 1960s as animated series doesn't say a word in the whole thing, but grunts the whole special. It's hilarious.
So they make it back, and when everybody hears their story, they start to realize maybe they were a little hard on the misfits. Maybe misfits have a place too. Even Santa realizes that maybe he was wrong.
I'm like, oh yeah? Really?
Rudolph, I promise, as soon as this storm lets up, I'll find homes for all those misfit toys.
All right, you can open up a dentist's office next week after Christmas.
All right, so that stuff is resolved.
Open up! Isn't a fit night out for man nor beast?
And the doors open, and in comes Cornelius and the bumble on a leash.
Now, calm down. Calm down. I reformed this bumble. He wants a job.
And he puts the star on the Christmas tree.
That's the message. Love always conquers hate and anger.
Yeah. But the problem is the next day is Christmas Eve. And again, we're with Mrs. Claus and Papa, who's still skinny, and she's trying to force him to eat. He's just upset because the elf song is driving him crazy.
Still.
Yeah. And we get the latest weather report, and the storm's not going to end. They're going to have to cancel Christmas.
Oh, man.
Everything's grounded. Oh, the poor kids. They've been so good this year, too. But I couldn't chance it. I'll have to tell everybody that it's all off this year.
And I wrote down, like, couldn't you just delay it a couple of days? And, like, you had to cancel, like, you got all the toys.
It's not Christmas if you delay it. What?
I've got some bad news, folks. Christmas is going to be canceled.
And we hear the whistle, and we see that bright red light.
Yeah, Rudolph, please, could you tone it down a bit? I mean, that nose of yours. That nose.
That nose. That beautiful, wonderful nose.
Rudolph, Christmas is not off, and you're going to lead my team.
I am?
Yes, sir. You and that wonderful nose of yours.
It's so funny because it really is genuinely satisfying
Yeah.
to hear the lines from the song when we finally get to it.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is, Rudolph, with your nose so bright, won't you guide my sleigh tonight?
It totally pays off.
Yeah.
It really does.
Well, for Santa,
Yeah.
right? Isn't that always Santa's always the one who's like, well, what's going to work for me? Oh, I'll take it. Yes, this.
It is funny how selfish this particular version of Santa is.
It's very selfish.
I knew that nose would be useful someday. I knew it all along.
Like, no, you didn't.
You did know, Dad.
And the camera pulls back, and there's the snowman outside the window looking in, who goes into and have a holly jolly Christmas.
Have a holly jolly Christmas. It's the best time of the year.
And we see the Bumbles helping, and we're hanging mistletoe, and we've got Yukon there, and they're loading Santa's sleigh. And suddenly, even though it's like the next day or a few hours later, Santa is now fat. And I wrote down, like, this is like some Robert De Niro level weight gain that Santa pulls off in this moment here.
He's the nutty professor. He gets
Totally. And he's fat enough because his belly shakes when he laughs, so we know we're cool.
Ready, Rudolph?
Ready, Santa?
Well, let's be on our way. Okay, Rudolph, full power.
And they sail off. Now we're back at the Island of Misfit Toys.
Yeah.
And Charlie and the doll and the spotted elephant are sitting in a totally lonely shot by the fire.
Looks like we're forgotten again.
But Rudolph promised we'd go this time.
Oh, guess the storm was too much for them.
And then way in the distance, we hear the sleigh bells ringing, and we see a tiny light.
Wait a minute. What's that? Is it?
It sure is. It's Santa. And look, Rudolph is leading the way.
You can see his nose from here.
And they land, and the toys all get in the bag.
Ready, Rudolph?
Ready, Santa?
Okay, Rudolph, full power.
And they all head off. You all know what's crazy?
What's that?
This scene is not in the original version in 1964.
Yeah, it's not.
They added it. Because the kids were upset. Like, what happened to those Island of Misfit Toys kids?
Yeah, it's like
toys?
an elf, right? Where the missing 2 pages of the story, they apparently sent letters, so the scene was added and animated in 1965. So I guess the original version people saw in 64 did not have this scene. So
nope.
Fascinating.
And then we finally get what we kind of started and teased in the beginning, but haven't heard completely. Now we finally hear Burl Ives singing.
Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer had a very shiny nose, and if you ever saw it, you would even say it glows.
As they deliver all the toys, all the Misfit toys, as the sleigh flies away into the beautiful Christmas night. So this first aired on December 6, 1964. It was a huge hit, unsurprisingly. Sure. And they knew as soon as it came out and it had this huge audience, they're like, oh, we're going to put this out annually. And all the other networks went, we need our own annual Christmas shows. And so Charlie Brown Christmas is the next year. Grinch is the year after that. And this is, of course, one of the most successful holiday specials of all time. It aired every year on NBC until 1972 when CBS bought it. Came back to NBC for its 60th anniversary in this year, this last year.
Okay.
And it is the longest continuously running Christmas special in the United States.
No surprise at all, man. No surprise at all.
Yeah. So I'll just give my final thoughts first. Okay. Do I think this is a filmmaking masterpiece? I do not. Do I get a really warm, fuzzy feeling in my heart when I watch it because it's part of my childhood? I absolutely do. And do I think that it taps into this feeling of being a misfit, which it's not just the people that are noticeably misfits that have. Every person at some point in their life feels unliked, unloved, unappreciated, uncared for, not fitting in, afraid, filled with anxiety, wanting to be something, not being understood. We all feel that way. And I think this is a great, great kind of beginner thing for little kids to start to understand how the world is going to be, and then has this message of, no, you can be special. You can be a dentist. It's okay that you look different. There's still a place for you. You can still be loved. You can still accept yourself, and you could still be the hero of your own story. So even though I don't put this up in the list of greatest pieces of filmmaking in the history of the world, I do put it up as one of the most special and important ones of my childhood. And so I'm really glad we got to cover it here.
Yeah, I agree. It was a lot of fun to walk into this one and revisit it again for our conversation. And I agree with you. I mean, I think this is the reason. Look, there's a lot of specials, movies, TV shows, what have you, books that talk about people that are out of place, people that are othered, people that feel inadequate, what have you. But the ones that stand the test of time have this special magic mix. And it's really tough to quantify or to pull out the ingredients and say, oh, this is the mix that makes it great. It's very tough to do that. And I think with Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, that absolutely applies. You know, the animations, the stop motion's not the greatest stop motion, but there's a quaintness to it that you really connect to. The voiceover performances are very brusque at times, but that all, you can feel that, you know that it feels realistic, right? And then what he goes through, what Rudolph goes through, the journey Rudolph goes through, the journey Hermey goes through, that's something we can all connect to. And because they're played at such initially smaller versions of themselves, when Rudolph gets bigger, you're still sympathetic to what Rudolph is going through. And then by the end, everyone learns the lesson. Well, I mean, less Santa more than anyone else, that the abuse that was going on to Rudolph is not the way we should deal with people who have things that are different or quote unquote different or not normal or unique and what have you. And I like that it works, whether the theme is for someone who is from another country or someone who is born with a certain quote unquote defect or made to feel inadequate because of they've got a loud laugh or they've got a weird way of speaking or they're part of the LGBTQ plus community. Like there's so many things that it stands for, that this special could work for, rather, that I think brings power to people who watch it. And at the end, it shows that the thing that you thought was the detriment is actually what makes you special in a positive way, and what makes you stand out. The thing that makes you different or that makes you feel inadequate can sometimes be the thing that makes you special and important and different. And more people need to embrace that in their lives. And I love that this special really does that, along with some fun little moments and humorous interactions here, and showing you that even the most horrible abominable can be redeemed to be essential to our society once it deals with its anger. So I love that too.
So that's what we think of Rankin and Bass's Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. And of course, we'd love to hear your thoughts, whether it's on Facebook, which you can find us by searching for the Cine-Files, on Twitter, which is Cine_Files, the Cine-File Podcast on Instagram. We'd love to hear all of your thoughts. And of course, as we mentioned at the beginning, you can support the show at patreon.com/the Cine-Files or Apple Podcast. You can also buy or stream Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer along with every other film we've ever reviewed at cinephiles.net. And you can reach me at SR Morris on Twitter, SR Morris1 on Instagram, and SR Morris on Blue Sky, which I'm just starting to figure out. John, how would people reach you?
Yeah, you can always reach me on the island of misfit toys myself. At the Rocha Says on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky, the Outlaw Nation on Twitch, and my YouTube channel, youtube.com/John Rocha Says. We got all kinds of stuff going on there as well. And my other podcast, the Geek Buddies and the Geek Buddies and the Hot Mic, that are out there for you all to enjoy as well. I don't forget sometimes.
And that is it for this episode. We're not going to be back next week. We're going to be back tomorrow with our next Rankin and Bass film, Santa Claus is Coming to Town. You definitely don't want to miss this one.